Welcome. We're hitting the afternoon, so appreciate you being here. You are here for our presentation with Angela Barrett and Kristin Oropeza, Flipping Science, the Science Lesson, Enhancing the 5E Learning with HyperDocs and AI. So this is very exciting content. And we're hoping for a few more people to jump in. And if you want to say hello in the chat, feel free. And whenever you're ready, Kristen and Angela, I can pass it on to you.
Okay, maybe we'll start like at 2:05 just to
Sure.
maybe see if we have any late people coming in. So hi Mia.
Angela, do we want to share the link for the survey?
Well, how about at 2:05?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh yay.
Mia's in the chat. Thank you for being here, Mia.
Someone else just came in.
And then if you're joining us, go ahead and have that chat open. We're going to also engage with you using the chat box. So if you don't mind, let us know like where are you? What is your role in education?
Mia's in the LBCC. That's Long Beach City College Community
Yeah.
College? Awesome.
So we're just going to start in about 2 minutes, give some audience members a few moments if they're running late to attend so they don't miss anything. So we'll start in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, while you're waiting, if you feel like telling us what you're enjoying about Teach for LA up till now, we'd love to hear that as well. We always like real-time feedback.
Yeah, feel free to unmute too. What have you attended? What have you enjoyed?
Linda, I went to Cerritos College too. I love their teaching program there. We are. Linda, are you planning to do, are you going to be transferring to Cal State Long Beach for their, I don't know what program you're in at Cerritos, but I know they have I went through the ITEP program there. Are you doing a similar program? I'm doing transfer, still need to apply first. Yeah. Luckily they make it really easy, right? The transferring from Cerritos to, if not Long Beach, then one of the local Cal State schools. But Long Beach's teacher program is really good, if I can say that.
Okay, so even if we have a small group, welcome, welcome. Kristen just posted the survey link in the chat box. So we just wanted to check in to see, engage what your knowledge and experience is with NGSS and science.
Can you see, Angela, if I click on that link, can you see the Google form now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this is just, when we say brief, we mean very brief. There's 3 questions. As Angela said, we just want to see where you're at with NGSS and 5E model. if you're not in the classroom yet, and if you haven't heard of NGSS, NGSS is our adopted science standards in the state of California. And so you can indicate there if you've looked at them, if you're not familiar with them, that just gives us a sense of where we need to go and take this presentation today. I just saw someone pop up in our waiting room, so I let them in. And then let's go over to the responses here. If there's any coming in. Angela, can you still see the response screen?
Yes.
That's right.
We
Okay.
put the link in the chat box. So we're going to be posting different resources, different links for you in the chat box.
Thank you for posting that again. I think there's a couple more people coming in. All right. For those just joining, thank you for being here. See, Vanessa came in.
So if you're just joining us, go ahead and open up that chat box, introduce yourself, let us know where you're from, what type of role you have in education currently, and then we also have a survey link. We just want to gauge experiences with science and NGSS, and then we're going to be posting our engagement in the chat box to make it accessible for you as well. So please go ahead and add any responses in the chat box, and then please go ahead and complete the survey. There we go. Thank you to who completed our survey. And if you're not familiar with NGSS, the way we are going to showcase the idea of using certain platforms and the model framework today, it will still benefit you even if you're not fully comfortable with the standards. So be okay with that. So we're just going to showcase what this could look like in science specifically. And the reason why we say NGSS, because like Kristin mentioned, those are our state adopted standards. And feel free to, if you have any questions, please post those in the chat box. If you want us to clarify anything or talk further about something, please definitely just let us know. So Kristin and I are going to be going back and forth through our session together. And so again, use that chat box, and we're happy that you're here.
All right. Let's get started here. Angela, you can see the presentation screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so hopefully everybody's here for the Flipping the Science lesson plan presentation today. We're looking at how to take a HyperDoc approach to the NGSS 5E model with some AI integrations along the way. Angela, do you want to start and kick us off?
Sure. I'm Angela. I am a former elementary teacher, spent a lot of my time in third grade. My experience in education is a little bit plus or minus of 20 years. And currently I have transitioned out and I'm working with adult learners as a professional development specialist for a curriculum company. And then also working for the LA County Office of Ed, supporting beginning teachers through the induction program as an instructor. And I'm here with Kristin, who I actually met and we became friends working at the same school site. So we're here together to present to you.
So hi there, everyone. I am Kristin Oropeza. I am I say former, but forever special education teacher. Like Angela, I've spent about 14 plus years in education. Most of that spent in a elementary special education classroom as an SDC teacher. I've done kind of the whole gamut of lower elementary grade levels. I spent a couple years as a tech coach. I love educational technology, so you'll see kind of some of that come out today with how we approach lesson plan and design in the classrooms and with some of the resources we'll share. Um, as Angela mentioned, I transitioned out of the classroom about 3 years ago this month to go work on a different side of education. I actually work for an educational nonprofit here in California. We do a lot of work with teachers and families and advocacy, all centered around the idea of using technology with students in a way that is healthy and helps them thrive in a very digital world. Like Angela, I also work part-time with our LA County Office of Ed. I support new teachers through the induction program. And then I also get to work with brand new teachers, like first year, second year teachers, or intern teachers who are taking courses still and getting their credential at the same time of being in the classroom. So, it's very exciting to be able to share just some of the stuff that we picked up along the way, right, Angela?
Yes, right. Yeah. Sometimes sharing our experiences, it makes us happy.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk about this part? What the
Yes.
with
So
this
the
five models?
first, yeah. So the first part or portion of our session together is just what is the NGSS 5E model? So when we looked at the survey, the responses that we received was like, we're not really familiar with NGSS. So as Kristen mentioned earlier, if you missed it, so NGSS are the science standards that are adopted by California. There are many states across our nation that utilize NGSS as their standards, or they have used it as a foundation for their state standards. So they're not just specific to California. They are definitely used and supported other growth in state standards with NGSS. And then the 5E model is a form of a lesson plan. And so we're going to be talking about lesson planning a little bit and what that might look like, because we want to make sure that what we share is hopefully applicable to you as you're going through your program and then when you're also in the classroom. So I'm sure through your courses that you've been taken, you've probably seen this typical daily lesson plan where we're introducing a lesson, we're modeling, we're providing guiding practice, independent practice. Maybe you see it as like your introductions, your anticipatory set. But a lot of times we're hearing and seeing the same type of lesson plan in our courses and will be reflected in the classroom when you're working with your administrators at your site. So we don't want to veer away from this. So when Kristen shows you this next slide, you're going to see an image of an outline of the 5E model. So yes, it looks different. However, using these same components, introducing a lesson, providing guiding practice and independent practice also applies to these sections. We're just being a little bit more specific on what this sounds like. So you'll see that first box says engage. So when we hear engage, we're introducing a lesson. When we're exploring, maybe we're providing guided practice there. When we're having students explain, maybe they're doing independent practice. And so we want you to make sure that we're not completely veering away from what we know, but we're just adding another layer to this. And this is called the 5E lesson model. And if you have any questions, if you did not hear this earlier, please definitely post them in the chat box, or if you'd like us to clarify something or review something, just let us know. So we also have, Kristen, I don't know if you're able to grab that link from San Diego County,
Yeah.
but we also want to provide resources there for you, just so you know when we're doing, so we do our own personal professional growth as by doing research as well, when we're working with adult learners and educators. And so we found this link from San Diego County that in regards to the 5E model of instruction. So Kristen, if you don't mind just posting that link in the chat box. And I know Teach for LA is going to share a copy of our slides where you will have embedded links for you as well. But if you'd like to explore these items, we're going to add those there. And then, so the quote that we pulled from that, if you don't mind, Kristin, going back to that slide.
Yeah.
Thank you. The 5E model provides a carefully planned sequence of instruction that places students at the center of learning. So moving from that teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. And we know, especially since Kristin and I come from an elementary background, that this looks different across grade levels. So what might be happening in a TKK1 classroom when it's teacher-facing and student-facing, it's going to start looking different when we hit third, fourth grade, and then even through secondary, middle school, and high school. But do know, even at the lower levels, TK1, 2, we're still striving for that student-centered environment where students are working on inquiry and practicing with hands-on experiences. And so that link there to San Diego just provides you with just a breakdown. If you're a reader like us and you like to see it in text, and that's there for you as well. So we're going to go through just what these 5Es are. So remember, NGSS are our standards, and those standards are from K up. TK has their own. They have their strands, so they're not part of the NGSS, but K up shares those standards. And we're going to start with the engage piece. So with engage, kind of like an anticipatory set in a lesson plan, we want to provoke interest and curiosity. We want to build background knowledge with our students. And I pulled these images from like what students are doing and what teachers are doing from an HM blog article. So Kristin will also share that link with you as well. What I really liked about this is just, you know, when we're trying to wrap our head around this and trying to figure this out, they kind of put it out there for you. So as simple as during the engage phase, students are asking questions, but the teachers are raising questions. And again, this will look different across grade levels because we're also trying to teach students with our speaking and listening standards how to formulate questions. That's a skill in itself. And that's something that can be practiced through this process. As we go through this, I know Kristin and I are curious from you, when you see this engage piece of a lesson plan, do you have any shares? Like, what does this mean to you? What could this look like for you? And what is something maybe you've done in science that is related to this engage piece? So go ahead and post that in the chat box for us also, because we not only do we want to share, we want to make sure that you're learning from your peers as well, because we know we're not the only ones with experience. We're sure some of you have either observed something or experienced it yourself. So please go ahead and just in the chat box, if you have something to share that reminds you of this engage piece, go ahead and plop that right there in the chat box. So you'll see between the teacher or the student side and the teacher side that the teacher is guiding and the students are being active learners. And that's the idea across the 5E model. And Kristin, if you want to go to the next slide.
Okay.
Feel free to plop any of your thoughts in the chat box. So the same for explore. As I kind of talk a little bit about the explore piece, if something resonates with you that you feel that is familiar or again observed that you've seen a teacher do in a lesson, share that in the chat box. So when we're talking about exploring, so first we went to engage, which is our anticipatory set. We go to explore, which could be guided practice and can shift to independent practice for sure. And this is where students are learning by doing, making observations. So in education, we talk about the 4 C's, the 21st century skills we want students to have. One of them is collaboration. So during exploration, it doesn't have to be independent. Students can work in pairs, they can work in small groups. And then we definitely want this to be the hands-on piece. When we say hands-on, it does not necessarily mean an experiment because we're going to be sharing a tech side. So how do we infuse technology, which is also considered hands-on? And students can record data. So again, in that image from that article, students are testing predictions. And then maybe teachers are listening to conversations students are having and what their insights are. Students are planning and conducting an investigation. And teachers are not only encouraging collaboration, but they're making sure that students are applying the expectations we have, right? So what collaborative conversations are they having? Are they maybe using sentence frames that you might be providing? Maybe they need a little guidance and scaffolding with that. But again, as we go through these, if there's anything that resonates with you, we'd like to highlight that and definitely post that in the chat box. The third piece of the 5E is explain. So we went from engaging to exploring, now to explaining. So this is where we want students to present their knowledge, maybe summarize what they've learned, define it, but this is where we'll see a lot of critical thinking strategies in place for them when we're talking about the 4Cs. Students are practicing the listen actively skills because this is where they're sharing. They're sharing out whole group. They're sharing with their peers. And this is where also, as they're recording their understanding, whether it's on paper, maybe it's a video platform, the teachers are asking for clarification from their students. Maybe they're guiding their students to build on their explanation of what they've just shared. And so we're posing these guiding questions. And again, looks different across grade levels, because sometimes maybe if you're in a TK2 grade level, maybe you're doing some of these things on an anchor chart and whole group style. Whereas as we're moving up through the grade levels, again, maybe small group or pairs.
Angela, I just want to point out that we
Yeah.
have Rolando who
Yeah.
shared some experience in the chat. So just in case anybody wants to see what Rolando.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and just share it out. I have noticed that when students are engaged, they all participate and give input based on their personal experience. And that part is definitely key. So at the start of any lesson we're doing, we try to make connections, whether it's academic learning connections. I mentioned I worked a lot in third grade. So it's, well, what did they learn in second grade? What do they already know from the previous grade levels that can support in this learning? Or in their personal life, what do they know about forces, right? When they're playing with like Hot Wheels or something, right? And then so Rolando continues to say the teachers then guide the input created by students and create additional learning opportunities. Absolutely. We definitely want to be that guide for those students to support that student-centered learning experience. Thank you. And I see Kristin captured my thinking as well. Like,
Great minds.
that's why I was say that's why we're good friends. She already knew what I was going to say. Okay, so then we have elaborate. So we move to elaborate, which can focus a lot on communication. And I kind of want to just share, like when we're going through content areas such as science, when we're having students write and we're having students speak, we're having students read, also keep in mind they're building on their skills and standards that are being taught for English language arts. So we don't want to keep that separate. So do know when we're talking about like communication, collaboration, speaking, listening, we are in turn supporting those English language arts standards also. So when we want students to elaborate, we want them to apply their learning further and extend their understanding. So maybe this looks like, if you're familiar with such strategies, as a jigsaw, Socratic seminar. Maybe you're using a video platform that they're capturing. So because time is of essence. We don't have time throughout the year to always have students just present in front of the class as a whole group. But if they create videos, maybe during independent work or certain station rotations, they're listening to their peers, and we can provide those opportunities without just spending the time for a face-to-face whole group presentation. So during this phase, Students are making connections between new and prior experiences because first, we wanted to lean on those prior background knowledge that they had, but now they've learned something else. So how are they connecting those two? And then maybe as the teacher, we're providing additional reasoning, right? Because they don't have all the experience, they don't have all the knowledge, but maybe we're building upon that for them. We're supporting them in that. And then we have our last area of the 5E, which is the evaluate piece, right? And, teachers find this important. This is where we collect data on our students. This supports us with our report cards. We still need to know how proficient students are becoming in the standards that we want them to meet. So we have the evaluation piece. And we're talking about the 4Cs. This is where we can get creative. Yes, it's important to have formative and summative assessments, but maybe these aren't just a quiz, or maybe these just aren't a paper pencil test. Maybe it's a presentation or a reflection. And students then can reflect on their progress. So Kristin and I, when we worked together, we came from an elementary site that had adopted Avid at the elementary level. And so it was important to promote reflection even at the elementary level on their learning. And so it's important not only for us as teachers to reflect on our teaching practices, but for students to reflect on their own learning. What did they have a challenge with? What did they find to be pretty simple and able to grasp? And then also giving peers feedback. So yes, it's important for teachers to give feedback to their students, but it's always a good idea to allow for students to give peer-to-peer feedback, to practice giving constructive criticism. What does this look like? And so with the oh yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to jump in really quick because you mentioned something I think that's really important with this piece, right? You said it's not just about like the formative and summative assessment and the more traditional means of like assessing students, but the student creativity part comes in. I know there's been quite a few presentations at this point that have talked about UDL, right? And one of those components of UDL is like the means of expression, right? And giving students the opportunity to have that voice and choice, right? To show in a way that makes the most sense to them, like their mastery of a concept. And that's where this comes in, right? So it's not just like you mentioned presentations, right? That's one way, but we have students who like to produce videos, who like to do music, who like to do more creative pieces with some of the programs that, teachers are using in their classroom, like Adobe Express or Canva. Those are some like creative platforms that can be tied in. And when you think about like that technology piece, right, can be tied into that step. So I just wanted to shout that out as well.
Yeah. And then even going as far as I know Kristin and I are advocates of educational technology, but there's the analog piece, like having students create a model or a poster, a collage. There's just so many different ways. Kristin mentioned UDL. So a lot of times when we hear about UDL, choice boards come up. And so again, depending on grade level, maybe it's not a good idea to have like 6 different choices, but maybe you're giving students 2 different choices. With my 3rd graders, I would tell them, so you have 2 choices, something that's analog, whether it's a model, a poster, a diorama, or maybe it's digital. Maybe you're going to create a slide presentation with Google Slides. But either way, I'm giving them 2 choices in a way, right? Like Kristin said, a video that can happen. So maybe you're like, I'm going to provide some analog choices and some digital choices. But whatever works for you too, and as management, because sometimes if we provide too many choices, then it all gets lost in the weeds. So especially for teachers and managing their time for grading, right, and giving feedback. So just think about that as well, that Yes, give students choice, and choice boards are great for that. And then also think about like, what is your capacity though? Like, what is your capacity when they are turning in these projects? But creativity is so important, not just in science, but across all grade levels. A lot of the items like Kristin just posted cross-curricular approach, like even though our main topic today is science, but really you can apply a lot of this like across content areas. Oh, Ruth. Hello.
Hi, I love hearing you talk about projects as a way to, you know, monitor student progress and understanding and reflection. And you mentioned how make sure that you're able to be able to review the projects, right? Because they can get so overwhelming. And so I was wondering, are there creative ways to do that, like at like checkpoints or students doing it together to sort of lighten the teacher load? I remember when I was teaching, I always like I put the students in charge of a lot of stuff, but also broke things down so I didn't have like this massive amount of assessing or rubric completion at the end. So I was just wondering if you might have any suggestions.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't know if Kristin wants to go first or because I
Uh,
know, and the only reason why I'm veering to Kristin is because I know she worked with 3 different grade levels when she was working in the SDC class.
or
And
different.
so, or 4 different grade levels. So
That's
Uh, uh,
actually where I refined
yeah,
that skill, Kristen, was when I was working in a learning center model that was technically second, third, and fourth grade, but
yeah.
you know when you're in a learning center model, it's like sixth grade level.
yeah, I taught K through third. So I had, as Angela would know, like I had some students they started with me as kindergartners and then left as like third graders, right? So, we have the same kid and you can only do, as I mentioned my session the other day, you can only teach the same lesson like from one year to the next, like so many times. So that's where like, having a variety of activities like comes in. But as far as like the workload, the grading workload, I should say, I mean, like I remember with my class one year we had a study on biographies, right? And so every child in my SEC class got to pick somebody they wanted to do. We called it a report, but it's not the traditional like handwritten report that we think of. Um, and so everybody picked whether it was a president, like somebody who made history, right? We had quite a few people interested in Martin Luther King Jr., like Amelia Earhart. And that project was like a multi-step, like multi-week project. And so students weren't just assigned like the end goal, like, right out the gate. Um, Things were assigned in chunks, right? So the first piece was like the research part. Like, so um, we had Chromebooks at the time, so everything, and I was very heavy advocate of Google Classroom. So everything was on Google Classroom. Students were able to access it at home if they had a device at home. Um, and so, students were doing research both at school and at home. They were making sure they had notes and collecting. A lot of them like to collect and insert pictures onto their slide deck, right, for their research deck. And so that was graded. And then once that was graded, we moved on to the next step, right? And so chunking that material makes it a little bit more manageable. You don't want to have to get to that final culmination project and then realize they didn't have their research in line, or or researching something opposite of what they told you they were going to research. So definitely like chunking. I think that worked best for the kids that I had in my classroom. Angela, I'll defer to you about what you saw in your third grade classroom.
Same. Like even in general ed, chunking is definitely, and these are things like even I'm sure Kristen would agree, like even from a beginning teacher to a more experienced teacher, like these tactics you learn along the way, right? Because they're management pieces. Oh shoot, this didn't work great last year. How can I make this a little bit better? Not just for them, but for you as a teacher. Because like Ruth said, that's a piece of it is our capacity, right? Because we have so many great ideas. We want to put all of this out. And then we're like, oh my goodness, I don't even have the time to look at the student projects or grade the student projects. And so it's just being mindful of that. So chunking is definitely wise. Like, and if you're going to do projects, maybe your first year, have everybody do the same type of project. Like when I first started, it was dioramas, right? 'Cause that's what I was familiar with, a diorama or a poster. But everybody was creating the same type of assignment. So yes, we advocate for student choice. But for you as a teacher, you can work your way up to that. Just because you don't do that all the time doesn't mean you're not working on that. And so the next year, maybe you're asking your students to do a poster and or a diorama, right? Now you're kind of adding those projects in. But definitely chunking and start small. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to give a choice board of 6 items, 6 different things, and this long list for students to choose from. Um, it might be great for them, but not for you on the back end. So definitely start small and then guide your students through the process in a chunking way, like Kristin said. Like check research first, then move on to the next step. Do check-ins with them. Always do check-ins with them, even if they're working on their project at home. Hey, let's bring our project in. It's due on Friday. Let's bring it on Wednesday. Let's see where everybody's at, because you might have to provide time in the classroom for them to complete projects, because we all know that not all students have the same support at home. And so you might have to revert to having projects completed in the classroom too. So it's just being mindful of those like pieces or characteristics. But that also comes in time. So if you feel like something didn't work out the way you thought it would, that's when we reflect, try to refine, and then come back to it the next year.
All right, Angela, I think we're ready to move on to what is a HyperDoc?
Yes. So talking about creativity.
Okay, so what is a HyperDoc? So HyperDocs, when I think of HyperDoc, I think of something that's very interactive, right, with some sort of links, right, and that student engagement piece, I think is really high up there on that list. HyperDocs was originally coined, the term HyperDocs was originally coined by 3 teachers, Lisa Highfill, Kelly Hilton, and then Sarah Landis. They are teachers out in, I believe they're in Central California, right?
Right.
Central California. And they started producing these very engaging lessons, right? Using like a Google Docs or Google Slides in some cases. And I think it's important to note that like HyperDocs, it embeds links right into the document so that students have access to the teacher guided research and creation. It's very much, I would say, a curation of resources from the teacher, what they are and what they are not. There's a nice little image here on, oops, let me go back there on the presentation screen. And I'm going to move this over here. So HyperDocs are obviously carefully crafted digital lesson plans, right, that require educators to have a mindset of thoughtful pedagogy. It's not just a Google Doc with links, right? There is actual, like, very much intention setting, when you go in and you plan a HyperDoc, and see how that fits in, whether it's a lesson you're going to use a HyperDoc for, how that fits into your larger unit. They are very visually engaging and they're packaged learning experiences for students. It is not like a pre-made curricular program, right? So it does involve some creation on the teacher part and some commitment to creating this enhancement, right, to your normal or your regular curriculum pieces. It's HyperDocs are how students use technology to create and collaborate, to give them opportunities to think critically, right, and to connect themselves to the larger world and their community. And then HyperDocs are not just a new app or a web tool. If you haven't, I know on the survey, a couple of people mentioned that they hadn't heard about HyperDocs before. a lot of this, a lot of our slides are hyperlinked. So if you go and you check out that link right there underneath the title, it'll take you to the HyperDoc Gal's website, and you'll see that they have some templates, some places to get started if you're just beginning and you're like right out the door, just need a little bit more support. We're going to take you through kind of what it looks like, and I'm going to start with this one right here, and how this came about, I think is is important. So when I was in the classroom quite a few years ago, we had just gotten some new science kits, and our district was busily adopting the NGSS science standards. And in order to do that, because it was brand new at the time, and not a lot of school districts had fully adopted them at that point yet, our district had hired a science TOSA, and the science TOSA had come in, and she had made these really great kits for each grade level. And there weren't a lot of them. I think each grade level had maybe 3 or 4 kits for the school year, that were then used between the different school sites. But it included like books that could be read aloud, like read alouds, and that was from like K through 5, right? It included hands-on activities for the students to do. And my job at the time was to come in as a technology TOSA and see how we could marry those activities from the science into something that could be used in the classrooms with teachers and involving technology. And so the lessons that we have here are adopted from materials that were provided in those initial like hands-on science kits from my previous district. Each of these, Angela, if I don't know if you want to put if it's possible, put the link in the chat.
It's in there.
Okay, awesome. So these are all hyperlinks. So this is like a template you can grab and go, right? Again, most of these are elementary. I think we have one for every K through 5, but we also have the template we'll share for if you're a middle or high school teacher as well. But just to show you kind of the difference from that standard lesson plan that Angela shared at the beginning to what a 5E lesson plan could look like. This is done, especially with my students, everything we did was almost always in Google Slides. When you're thinking about enhancing like lessons and you're thinking about like inserting videos and links, Google Slides is the easier option because when you insert videos on Google Slides, they can't navigate away from the video. It's not like unleashing them to YouTube, right? And then they get all the recommended viewing, the videos, and then they start to go down a rabbit hole you didn't want them to go down. So we tended to use Google Slides. So you'll see like the primary lessons here are all like Google Slides based. But we had a lesson about for our first graders for the phases of the moon. And so when you open this, you're going to be prompted. If you're not familiar with Google Slides, it'll prompt you to make a copy. And so what this will do, it'll put a copy of this lesson onto your Google Drive. So you can go in, you can change it to your heart's content. Everything is editable. But to show you, let me move around some of this Zoom stuff because it's getting in the way here. You'll see that on the slide deck here, we have each of those 5 pieces, right? We have the engage, we have the explore, we have the explain, we have, where's the explain's kind of long, the elaborate and extend, and then we have at the bottom an evaluate piece. And so you'll see that there's for the engaged, right? That's that part where you're trying to pique their interest and get them excited. So you have them watching a video, right? Directly into on the Google side, and then they can record their observations down here. And the same thing goes for if you use like a phrase that's really popular within the NGSS standards is like your wonderings, right? Your curiosities about a certain topic. And so having them think and wonder about like, something that they didn't know about, maybe it's something they heard in the video, so they note a wondering and then they note something that they're curious about. Moving into the explore, again, very hands-on when you're using like Google Slides. So this is all things that they can go and move and edit, right? And they can, these pieces aren't locked in place, but they can move these pieces and they can put the moon phases in orders, in the order that they believe is correct, right? So again, giving them something tangible that they can almost like, like, I don't want to say a puzzle, right? But something tangible that they can do and engage with on the slide. And it's not just, asking them to type a reflection. There's some more opportunities for them to watch additional videos, right? To glean any more new information that they learned from this video that might have been different from the first one. And I like to put in this, and Angela and I have had pretty extensive conversations. Like if you use a science journal in your classroom, which I did, I had journals, like interactive journals for everything in my classroom, for math, for reading, and then for science. And so this doesn't replace that, right? Like we still want, and having this lesson in using technology and having it in Google Slides, it does not replace the need to have those physical hands-on opportunities for students, because that's really a key component to NGSS, right? So this is just in addition to some students, maybe they're more comfortable writing it out in their science journal. Some will require them to draw, right? For this activity, is actually asking them to draw a model of how the moon, sun, and earth are related and just like spatial context, right? And so that's kind of easier to do with a pencil and paper rather than trying to use maybe the shapes, from the toolbar up in Google Slides, which they could do if they wanted. But we also recommend having that physical like science notebook as well. Essentially, it takes you through, there's an investigation that they do with a light bulb and a styrofoam ball, right? And that was a part of the kit that our science TOSA had created. Some more opportunities. Again, when we talk about incorporating, like, and thinking about these 5E models as something that's kind of cross-curricular, it's not just science they're talking about, but there's a read aloud, right? So you're pulling in some of those reading and listening skills as they're doing this as well. And making it more cross-curricular and some of the more technical skills that they're going to be using. And then that final component, right? Like when we talked about evaluating, again, it doesn't have to be that formal pencil paper like test. It's something could simple, especially for our younger guys and gals, for being able to just go back to a former activity that they did earlier on in the unit and lesson, and be able to identify, like the correct phase of the moon now that they've had some more input and information. The other thing to note is like this slide deck, right? We would not expect like a teacher to go through this entire slide deck in one day, right? So you could be working on this unit for a week, right? And maybe I do, depending on how much time I can afford to dedicate to my science each day, maybe we're only doing one slide on that slide deck for that day in the 15 or 20 minutes that I have to dedicate to science, like after we get back in from lunch. So don't think like that you have to, as a teacher, go through this entire slide deck in one day. It's usually just one or two slides, depending again how much time you have to dedicate to your science instruction. So that's again one example of like what a 5E lesson could look like using Google Slides for like the first grade classroom. We've also included an example for second grade. And I like showing this one. Angela, I'm looking at the time and I just want to be cognizant of the time that we have left, but I'll show this because when we think about some of those more creative opportunities for students, right? We still have the videos that the students have. We have them recording their wonderings, but there's an opportunity in this particular lesson for, when we talk about elaborating or extending the learning, they watch a video about like what a park ranger does. Specifically in this park was in South Carolina, but it talks about like, what does a park ranger actually do? What does their day-to-day job look like? And then students are then asked to go and pose as a park ranger, right? And they can do this in either pairs or trios, right? So you get that collaboration component as well. And they can use some kid-friendly search engines there to create a travel brochure for this particular park. It was the Grand Canyon. But we have that, again, everything in these documents are linked out. So you can see that we have this link to a blank trifold brochure, so they can do that within Google Slides. Again, using that technology piece. Could it be done on paper and pencil? Yes. Like, print that out, have them do it paper and pencil. If you have students who want the option of being able to do it online and working within Google Slides. I had something similar where we did a similar brochure with my 5th and 6th grade students, and it was about like countries. And the teacher had them do it online, and then she ended up printing it out. So that was an option too. So you have a physical, something physical, right, to hang up on the wall for, like open house, right? So that was just, again, not just showcasing that voice and choice for students, and how to get a little bit more creative with some of these lesson components. And then, Angela, did you want to talk about the 3rd grade lesson and how that looks different?
Yeah, so we've been adding the links in the chat box. So the 3rd grade lesson, we're just transitioning from a Google slide to a Google Doc, not for any other reason, but just to show you the difference. You could use Google Slides from K through 12th. You can use documents. It's whatever, when it comes to tech and you're creating something you want students to work with, it's about how comfortable you are too. So maybe you're super comfortable with Google Slides instead of Docs, or vice versa, your choice. So that's why we're showing this. But with a Google Doc, the way things can be shared is a lot different from a Google slide. You'll see that a lot of it's just embedded links. So kind of like the when Kristin was talking about HyperDocs, kind of like what a traditional HyperDoc would look like, which are just the embedded links. And so we give the explanation, we add the links for the students, and even the video. So you'll see the videos are as links. However, we are going to show you a way to add videos to Google Docs that eliminate distractions, but same idea, just a different format.
And then there's some additional grade level examples if you're either working with 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade students. Those are some sample activities. Again, everything will force a copy, so you can grab a copy of that template and really make it yours, and what's relevant and applicable to your students. And I think now we're going to move into some tools that might help make lesson planning a little bit easier. As you start to think about, okay, now you have a template, right, for the 5E model, but you might have to do some additional work with some of the curation of materials here. Angela, you want me to talk about this piece, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're just these, like what we wanted to do, especially if this is new-ish to you, just like we would do with our own students, we wanted to curate information for you. So that way you're like, oh, this is a great idea, but now I have to go find stuff. So this isn't the end all be all, but we wanted to give you just like a starter toolkit to kind of begin with the process of creating these. And so these links here, and I put the bit.ly in the chat box. And just as a reminder, Teach for LA is going to be sharing these slides as well. And you'll have access to all of these outside of our session together.
And these are great. I think we chose these two because these are like they're super interactive if you haven't gone and explored them. National Geographic for Kids is a great site for science content, right? For reading skills, like they have tons of video, tons of nonfiction content for students. Google Arts and Culture is another one. It's a free site, right? And it's when we talk about that creativity piece and the cross-curricular approach, right? This is great for pulling some of that arts and the liberal arts kind of stuff in. There's Brain Pop and Brain Pop Junior. Both have a free option, and we always advocate for free, right? We don't ever say to go out and pay for subscriptions you don't need. So they both have free options. ReadWorks is another really cool site. If you haven't been to ReadWorks, I think I'm still logged in here, maybe not. They provide free nonfiction reading pieces, right? Like text for students, which is when very helpful when you're creating and curating a HyperDoc and you need, students to gain a little bit of information by reading a piece of text. Maybe it's not covered in your science, a lot of science textbooks, if you haven't adopted a new science textbook that is NGSS aligned. So this is really helpful for that. For the NGSS standards, we talk about like phenomena, right? And so this site is really cool if you're looking for something to in that really initial like engage stage to like grab one of these images and use it and ask students like, what do you see in this picture? What is going on, right? What are you curious about? And so they have a ton of images that's free to use for educational purposes. Included too, we have the UC Museum of Paleontology, so they have K through 16 resources, as well as the Annenberg Learner website. All right, Angela, you want to talk about Video Link real quick?
Yeah, so we shared some websites with you, but we're also going to share some tools, technology tools that you can use as well. So when I mentioned earlier, when Kristin displayed the Google Doc sample versus the Google Slide sample, Video Link, I just posted it in the chat box. What Video Link will do, it will take a YouTube video link and it will provide a link for you that takes away all the distractions. So similar to what it would look like on a Google slide when students view it, but you can use this particular link by generating it. Now, I did post in the chat box, in order to curate these links, like save them, you will need to create an account, but it's free. They have a free version, and then again, it gives you all these different options on how you can share it. So say you're using Google Classroom as an LMS, it will connect to your Google Classroom. That's how easy it is. And then again, if you're creating like a Google Doc of some sort or Google Slide, you can embed those links by grabbing it there. So feel free to play with these, and I added that link for you in the chat box. And everything that we share with you today will have at least surface level a free version. So we want to make sure you know that too. You do not need premium to move forward with any of these items.
So the next one, the next tool that we have found really useful when we do HyperDocs is a tool called PearDoc. PearDoc's really great for both synchronous and asynchronous teaching. One of the reasons why we like it, we found that it increases student participation when we are doing lessons in the classroom. If you've heard of like Nearpod, right? Nearpod is very similar to PearDoc. They both do very similar things when it comes to student engagement, being able to actively engage students in the learning or of a particular lesson. You can build decks on both platforms. PearDoc, yeah, I think is just one I've used forever. And it's really great at looking at formative like assessments too along the way. So it gives you data back on your students and how well they're doing or how actively engaged they are with a particular lesson. And then that provides for differentiation within the lesson.
And then
So,
Kristin, really
yeah.
quick, sorry. I
Oh
just
yeah.
want to add, so those Google Slides that Kristin shared for the first and second grade examples, if you're not familiar with Pear Deck, what it does is there's an extension that connects with it. It'll turn these Google Slides into a Pear Deck. So now there's a way where their students are working on it within this app, which is great synchronously, especially if students are first learning it with you. But once you start switching to independent and asynchronous, this is where this helps with that too. So that's why we're sharing that Pear Deck, because it works seamlessly with Google Slides.
You don't have to go. I haven't been on Nearpod in a while, but like I know Nearpod, you have to like export your or import your your Google Slides and then do it on there. And this just makes it, having an extension within the actual platform of slides just makes it 100 times easier. So this is just kind of what it looks like. When you run the extension, you have this little, his name's Perry, right? The little logo at the top. And it shows up here on the right-hand side of your screen. It is very guided. So if you need, like most of these are all come in templates. There's also a template gallery that you can look at if you're looking for specific types of slides to include, right, at the beginning or end of your lesson. Again, some of the responses are limited underneath the free model, but you can still do like multiple choice, right? You can do numbers. I think in text, the only ones I think are premium options are the draw and the draggable features. And the audio is a new one as well. All right, going back to
Okay.
this. Okay. Are we ready to move on to
Yes.
Screencastify? Okay. All right. You want to talk about Screencastify? You want me to screen talk?
Yeah, so Screencastify is a video platform where you can record, like, so just like this, we're recording in Zoom as we're presenting. It's the same idea with Screencastify. And teachers can use it, but it's also very student friendly. So students, I've had third graders practice Screencastify by exactly what we're doing now. They're sharing their screen, they're sharing their slide deck, and they're presenting like we would. And so it one helps them become learners on video creation, but also practicing what it looks like, if you're in a Zoom or a Google Meet. It's the exact same idea. And so the features that are there, you get 10 videos at the free version. 30 minutes for the videos, there's captions, translations. I added the link in the chat box, but it definitely is user friendly. And then at the bottom of that list, you're going to see 10 AI assistant. And so Kristin's going to give you just a little bit about that, because as often as we've presented on this material, now with AI being this new piece of educational technology, we wanted to make sure that we showcase some items behind that.
So you'll see that, as Angela mentioned, right? Like things are moving very quickly with AI integrations into platforms that have been around for 10, 15 years, right? Screencastify being one of those. And with their new AI assist, some of the features that it includes is that it will add, just based on your video, right? AI will determine a relevant descriptive title. You're not sitting there trying to generate a detailed summary of your video. It's doing it for you. It's making your videos easier to refine and reuse with accurate summaries, right? AI is really good about like analyzing data and patterns and looking at that. And so that's where this kind of technology comes in. It's going to be able to automatically enable translation into 50 world languages, and then it better engages and supports students with captions and translations available on every single video. It's not something that you have to go in and like toggle on or off like a tool, right? In YouTube, you have to put the closed captioning on. It'll automatically do it for you when you use the AI assist feature. On deck, those are some features that they're working on currently per their website, but they're looking on how to get AI suggested multiple choice and short answer questions on every video. So if you're familiar with like a tool like not Pear Deck, Edpuzzle, it sounds like Screencastify is going to be able to do something similar in the near future. Making assessments simple with AI assisted automatic grading. That's another huge thing where we're seeing AI come in and doing automatic grading based on a rubric that the teacher sets before, pushing out the assessment. There's automatically tagging of videos just to make it relevant to the learning standards. And then it also enables transcripts on your videos, which can be very helpful for students who might have special needs and require maybe like that visual, right? I know Zoom does something very similar. When you have a Zoom recording, it automatically transcribes the meeting and the chat notes. And so that's really helpful for students who might need that tool. All right, Angela, I think we got about 5 minutes before Ruth.
I know. Okay, so really quick, Edpuzzle's another one. I'm going to provide this in the chat box. So this is also a video platform, but this in a different way. This is where you can provide a video and attach questions to it. And so students can watch a video and then answer formative questions as they go through the video. So it's like an exit ticket within. So this is something that you can also add as far as when we're talking about evaluating and even as an anticipatory set, right? Introducing something to students, but then also kind of gauging where they're at with the phenomena, like Kristin was saying. And then with the free version, there is also, again, an AI integration. So the next piece for this is the AI integration is a little bit simpler. When we're talking about questions, when we're creating questions for a video, I mean, for teachers, like we have so much on our minds. And so how better than to have something help like generate questions for you? You really like this video, but you don't want to take the time to create the questions. Edpuzzle will help generate questions for you. And not only that, but they can help auto grade open-ended questions. Now, not extensive questions or prompts, but easy, simple responses that students can add. But how great is that to have somebody like a helper help you grade open-ended questions? And so that's the teacher assist piece for Edpuzzle.
And if it wasn't clear, like they already in the platform, they will grade the multiple choice questions. And so having something for the short answer responses, right? Where you would typically have to go in and you'd have to look and sit there and grade whatever 35 responses to your class, or if you're a middle or high school teacher, a lot more than that if you're using it across class section. It now offers a feature for you. All right. Angela, do we want to talk about just what's on here? Because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah. So we're kind of giving you a layout of if you decided to move forward with this, what steps can you take? And so you can use this as a guide as you're going through creating a HyperDoc to go with a 5E model. And these are just steps to follow. And then if you're not familiar with the NGS standards, we also curated them for you by grade level. So those are direct links for you there if you've never seen them before. And then what we've also offered are in Google Slides and Google Docs, a template for you. So Kristin showed you like what does a slide deck look like done? And what we've done is created one like a template for you. And so we've already set out the slides for you, and then you just fill it in. And then the same with a Google Doc as well. So if you're not sure where to begin, we have a plain Google Doc and then one with guiding questions for you as well. And then we even went even further. We love Slides Mania. And so Slides Mania is this woman who, to support her daughter in education, she was a teacher, she started creating slide decks. And so now she posts these online. They are free. These are just a couple that could support you at the science level. And so if you click on those images when you get the slide deck, they will take you straight to that specific slide deck. But she has a ton more that you can explore. We just kind of pulled a few that were science related.
Yeah. People always ask, like, how do you get such pretty sentences? It's not us, right?
Yeah.
And then these are some just additional templates there. I want to go and talk a little bit about this because we did want to talk briefly about the AI integrations, right? When you're creating lessons, and this is, I think, a really important piece as you start to think about that. I have quite a few interns who use AI in their lesson planning. And Angela and I have talked about this and when to use AI, when it should be appropriate, right? Like when should and could you be using it, right? And so think of AI as like a thought partner, and not like the college student you're paying to do your homework, right? And so for example, if you're using like a program, right, like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or Claude.
Claude.
Yeah, Claude, I think it's Claude, but I have a guy I work with who pronounces his name Claude. So um just make sure to use it in a way that you're trying to glean feedback and insight into your lesson, right? We always recommend like don't we recommend it not going to like ChatGPT and saying like, right off the bat, create this lesson for me. It's always great to have something created and then use it again as a thought partner to get information and feedback, right? And about how you can make it better. And with all kind of GBTs, right? Like the better the prompt when you are prompting and interacting with these large language model systems, the better the output is going to be. And I kind of just wanted to share like what that would look like, right? Like how can I use like just ChatGPT to make my lesson better? And it's always helpful, like, a lot of this, like the practices like Angela and I have incorporated over the years, it's because of experience. Like we see what works one year, what worked really well, what didn't work well, and we tweak it over time. And so at the beginning of your year, you don't have that like that knowledge accumulated yet. So it's great to have this tool to be able to offer like an additional insight into like, okay, like here are some things you might have forgotten, right? Like to enhance your lesson. So I'm just on ChatGPT. Again, I use the free version of ChatGPT, even though they have a paid version. I didn't see a big difference. I went back to my free version. And what you're going to do, you're going to ask it a prompt. And so we've included the prompt on the slide. I think, Angela, I included it.
I put the prompt in the chat box.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me grab it really quick because I want them
Yeah.
to see right here. Okay. So in ChatGPT, again, in the prompt, you want to be as specific as possible, right? This is, for the most part, a very general prompt. It just says, I created this lesson a few years ago. Like, how could I enhance this using the 5E lesson model? Okay. If you teach students with special needs, you can even go further and say, can you please include like more hands-on activities? Can you differentiate activities? Be very specific and like I won't say specific, be more explicit in like the information you give the system. We still want to value like the protection of PII, right? Personal identifying information. So you're not telling the system any personal information, but you can say like I have a variety of students in my class with varying needs, right? I might have students who struggle with reading comprehension skills or who are struggling with the science and GSS standards, and so like that kind of information you can include, right? I'm also going to include, I'm just dropping a copy of that second grade erosion lesson that I did. And all I'm going to do is see like what kind of feedback it gives me after analyzing this lesson to make it a little bit better, right? And so you'll see, right, for each of those 5 sections, the engage, the explore, the explain, the elaborate, it gives me something additionally that maybe I hadn't thought about when I initially created this lesson. So for example, underneath engage, it says add a hands-on quick demonstration, right? A simple erosion demonstration using sugar cubes and water, right? And a dropper to model rain on rock. Include a photo gallery slide deck of real world images. Again, simple things I could have done. I didn't probably think about the first time, but it gives you a different perspective, a new set of eyes, right, on your material. I think it's important, especially I will say as a special ed teacher, you feel so siloed sometimes on like what you're doing and activities you're doing in the classroom with students. Luckily I had Angela to kind of bounce ideas off when we worked at the same school site. You don't always have that, right? You may not always have a mentor at your school site who you can turn to and say, hey, like I have this idea for a lesson. I just don't know if it's going to work for my kiddos. And so that's where things like this tools like this come in. So it provides some very like concrete, very, I think, simple for the most part, additions you can include to a lesson you already created. Angela, anything else you want to say about that?
No, this is great.
Okay. And again, that was just using that ChatGPT. I think that wraps us up.
I
All the
know.
time we have, I know there's so much, So much we tried to cram in here. And I hope, like we talk about this all the time. We do share a lot. And we've mentioned before that it stems from our need of like wanting to share resources that we found helpful, being at school sites that didn't always embrace, right, the use of educational technology. And so we hope that today, like with our session, that you found just maybe one thing, one tool, one activity that you are excited to go home and explore a little bit more. Because I
And
think,
then sure, next slide too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if you want to connect with us, we are on LinkedIn. We also have our emails here. So if you'd like, bounce ideas off of us or just connect with us to add us to your PLN, feel free to do that. So thank you for having us. Thank you for joining our session today.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to fill out that reflection. We always want to know how we did, and our attendees, our presenters want to know as well. So thank you so much, ladies. I got to jump, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later.